He's written a number of different books. I'm sure you recognized Without Reservation, Little Pink House, to name a few. His latest book, Poisoned, is out. We're going to talk about that in just a bit. I'm talking about Jeff Benedict. Jeff, good morning. How are you, buddy?
Lee, it's great to be here.
I love having you here, man. We talked a couple times on the phone, but you were doing a lot of sports stuff. We were talking about some Sports Illustrated stuff the last couple of times we talked. You're writing periodically for them, of course, in between your novels as well. But that has to be really exciting, because I know you're a huge sports fan, right?
That's how I got into journalism. Actually, was writing sports books, and I did a few pieces for SI over the years. I did a series on Kobe for the magazine back when he was in trouble, but last year, signed a contract with them and started a more formal relationship, and it's been just fantastic.
Now, when you did that story on Kobe, did you actually have to meet and talk with him, or is that just, how did that come about?
When I did those stories, Kobe was his trial was underway, and he couldn't talk to anybody in the media, and the judge had actually issued an order barring all lawyers on both sides from talking to the press. So I basically dug in and interviewed everybody else, and did 3 pieces for SI that were supposed to be a build-up to the trial. And one of the things that happened in that process, Lee, was I got some documents that were under seal, which caused a tremendous amount of controversy when SI put them in the magazine. But it was fun.
You got a way to get yourself mixed up in a good way, though, journalistically. I mean, you really can get in there and scrap with some of these people, which is why I think people really love reading what you put down.
Yeah, those Kobe stories were, definitely one of the highlights of my career. And then the trial fell apart, and I went and did a series for the Los Angeles Times, which was a deconstruction of that case. But that was really my introduction to SI.
You have a way of taking things that other people may say, well, how are you going to make a book out of that? Where's the interest in that? And you do it in a way where you actually turn true stories into a turn-paging like thriller novel. I don't think anybody else out there can do that, or does it?
Well, there aren't many people who do it at all. I mean, when I started getting into writing, one of the guys I'd like to read a lot was Bob Woodward from the Washington Post, who writes great books about Washington and politics. And I read almost all of his books when I was in law school and grad school. I don't write about that, but I try to turn these stories into, I want them to read like a movie or a novel, and take things that, like eminent domain. Who wants to read about that?
Sure, that's the thing. That's my point.
Or food poisoning. Who wants to read about that? But usually what I do is try to focus on the people and the personalities in these stories, and usually what you find is they are incredibly compelling characters who live these experiences and stories, and people are interested in that. They want to know what makes people tick and what do people do in these incredible and extreme situations, because people like to look in the mirror and say, well, what would I do if that was me?
Sure.
If someone was trying to take my house, or if my daughter ingested a hamburger that was contaminated with E. coli, what would I do? And that's sort of my approach when I take on a topic.
It had to be actually easier for you being from this area, being able to do the story. Obviously, 2 big major books literally in your backyard. I mean, that'd help, right?
Yeah, I've always thought in 10 years, southeastern Connecticut was home to 2 of the biggest stories in America. One was the explosion of Indian gaming. We were home. It started here.
Sure.
It's everywhere now. It's not a story anymore. But when it started here, this was where the door opened. And then the eminent domain case is a seminal Supreme Court case that set rules for the rest of the country, and it'll be a case that kids read about in history books for decades. And I thought it's pretty amazing that we live in the cradle of those 2 stories, and I was here when they happened, and it was great to write about them.
Without Reservation, it's interesting. We both grew up in this area. I can't remember what it was like before Indian gaming was here. Think about it. What did we do? What was out there?
Well, I guess, here's where I was so ignorant and oblivious is, Lee, I left here right after high school, and I was gone for a decade. And all of a sudden, one day I'm up in Boston, I'm in law school, and I came home one summer like I like to do and visit, and I had no idea there was a Foxwoods. I didn't know I was like, how in the heck did this thing get here? This is incredible. And that's really what started me on the project.
And it's even grown since then. It's literally, you're driving down Route 2 and you look, and over the trees comes this giant, just this giant mecca of gaming. And it's in 2 locations.
I know.
2 locations. Has 2 of the biggest casinos on the planet right in our own backyard. It's crazy.
It is crazy.
His newest book, Poisoned, I'm talking about Jeff Benedict, has been kind enough to actually come here in the studio. If you want to ask him something in particular, 860-442-WXLM. We'll either put you up on the air or get your question off the air to ask Jeff. You're a Mormon, and you actually went on a mission. Tell us, I think it's a fascinating story. Will you tell us about that?
Yeah, right after graduating from Waterford High School, I remember a couple of friends, we were on the beach, Pleasure Beach, right after graduation.
Right.
Where are you going to school? Where are you going to school? What are you doing? And then it gets to me, and it's like, well, I'm going on a mission for the Mormon Church. It's like, you're doing what?
Yeah. I sat right behind you in homeroom. I didn't know this was all going on. So you actually kept all this stuff kind of close to the vest, right?
Well, I was the only Mormon in Waterford High School for most of the time that I was there. My best friend became one in our senior year, and then one other girl that came later. But when you're the only one, you don't say a whole lot about it. You just kind of quietly go about your business. But as soon as high school was over, I was off to, I was sent to Seattle and spent 2 years there on a mission. It was, one of the best things that ever happened to me.
When you go on a mission, I think that's kind of confusing to people.
Yeah.
What is a mission?
Well, what it is in the Mormon Church is everybody's pretty familiar now with, there's a Broadway play called The Book of Mormon, which is a play off of 2 boys that, are in white shirts and ties with name tags.
Right.
It's a comedy, but in real life, that's what you do. For 2 years, you're sent somewhere, and you don't know where you're going to go, but they send you somewhere, and for 2 years, you're asked to basically teach other people who don't know anything about the church what it is and what the beliefs are. And it's actually a pretty tough thing to do when you're a teenager.
Sure.
It's really tough.
So you're knocking on doors?
Knocking on doors. I was sent to a city, Seattle. We had 22 foreign language speaking missionaries in our mission. I was English, obviously, but we did street presentations in downtown Seattle. We did a lot of door knocking. I fell in love with the city. I met my wife there, which was the greatest thing that happened on the mission. I went back after my mission, went to college there, and started dating the woman who became the woman of my dreams.
Sure. I can imagine knocking on the doors. What kind of reactions did you get? It must have been horrible sometimes.
Particularly Seattle, because at that time, Seattle was a really strong, it still is, born-again Christian home base, and there was a lot of animosity towards Mormons and some other religions too, so it was tough. When you're 18, you're 19, but you're right after your 18th birthday, and suddenly you're out on the street and you're running into people in the my view is, if you can sell religion to someone on their doorstep, you could do anything.
Right.
And when I came home from there, I think my people skills and my public speaking skills and my confidence were, off the charts compared to what they were when I got out of high school.
Sure.
It was like a 2-year intensive course. I didn't figure it out till it was over that when you go on a mission, you're really there to convert yourself.
What is it that's different about Mormons? What's the big deal?
Yeah, I don't think it is a big deal. And like you and I are sitting here, I don't think, we are side by side. I don't think there's a difference between us at all. The difference in the Mormon faith is that, that distinguishes it from basically all other Christian faiths is that we believe that in addition to the Bible, there's another book of Scripture called the Book of Mormon. Mm-hmm. And, the name of the play.
Sure.
We believe that book is Scripture too. And, we believe that there's, someone on the earth today that's like the apostles in the New Testament. Those are really, some of the distinguishing factors. But when you get down to Christ and is he your Savior and all that, we're like every other Christian, and so it's not a big deal. And I'm perfectly comfortable being around people of any faith just as much as I am around my own.
All right, let's get to this book, because the book is absolutely fascinating. It's a page turner, and again, Poisoned. Why don't you start and tell us how you began and why you began the process of putting this book together?
The thing, Lee, actually, I could trace the history of this book back to when we lived in Nyanek 4 years ago. When we lived here 4 years ago, my wife was starting to transition into healthier food.
Okay.
And trying to buy organic stuff. And it was then that she started talking to me about, you should really do a book on the food industry. And I kept saying, that's the kind of stuff Michael Pollan writes about, and Eric Schlosser, Fast Food Nation, Omnivore's Dilemma. Those are books about a topic like food.
Yep.
I don't do that. I need a story to build around. And I just couldn't visualize how to do a book on the food industry. Then we moved to Virginia. We bought an old farm. and that hadn't been farmed on for years.
Okay.
And we had no intentions of farming. We're not farmers.
Right.
But we had 20 acres, and we had an old farmhouse, and my wife started putting in organic gardens. Well, 4 years later, we have an organic farm. I mean, we grow most of what we eat, and
Right.
we have everything you could imagine there. And in the process of doing that, she totally revolutionized what we eat, how we eat, and it got me thinking a lot differently about food safety. And I started thinking, maybe the way to do this book is to find an outbreak. So I started paying attention to foodborne illness outbreaks on the CDC's website and stuff like that. And there's a lot of them.
Sure.
And I didn't realize how many of them there are. And most of them aren't huge, but I started looking for like the outbreak that I could tell a story around. And I got to Jack in the Box, which was the biggest outbreak we've had in contemporary history. It happened in 93. Most people remember that. It happened in Seattle.
Yeah.
It was hamburgers, killed children. It was brutal. And so I started digging into that case. And once I met the first character, which was this young lawyer from Seattle named Bill Marler, who was a nothing lawyer at the time. He was a fledgling guy doing slip and falls and car accidents and those kind of cases.
Yep.
And this case kind of fell into his lap, and he ends up representing over 100 children in the outbreak, including one who became the poster child of the outbreak, and she's one of the central figures in my book,
Right.
Brianne Kiner. But when I delved into that and started, the story is important because this case set the stage for food policy going forward. It's the precursor to Omnivore's Dilemma and Fast Food Nation and organic farming and farmers markets and Whole Foods and Trader Joe's. All of that stuff comes after this case. And so I knew it had historical significance. The question is, does it have characters that will drive
Sure.
a 300-page book? And believe me, when I got out to Seattle and started interviewing people from this case of 20 years ago, I was blown away. I mean, I was like, here we go.
But you didn't have one moment in your life that said, well, this is disgusting. I need to find out about food safety. Nothing like that.
It was nothing like that. It was more that, you always wonder about what influences writers to do what they do, whether they're fiction writers or nonfiction writers.
Right.
And I can tell you that if it weren't for my wife, this book would have never gotten done.
Okay.
Because I was not even looking at this, frankly, didn't even care
Sure.
about this subject. It was way removed.
So she started you on the organic
did.
food, the whole natural
Yeah.
food. So now, when you say you eat everything grown on your farm, there's no more fast food for you. No, nothing like that.
Our children haven't had fast food in years.
Is that right?
And when I say fast food, it's a broad statement for me. I'm not just talking about McDonald's.
Right.
I mean, Sizzler and Applebee's, those are fast food. Chili's is fast food. My kids just haven't eaten any of that in a couple of years.
If you do go someplace to
Yep.
go out to eat, I'm sure you do once in a while.
Yep.
What kind of a restaurant are you going to?
I'm pretty picky. I'm really picky.
Yeah.
And I ask a lot of questions now. I mean, if I go into a restaurant that I don't know.
Right.
I mean, I have my favorite restaurants in various cities that I go to a lot, like New York, Seattle, Boston, D.C., whatever. But if I'm in a city I don't go to very often and I end up in a restaurant, first thing I do when I get the menu is, if I'm going to have a steak,
Right.
I'll ask the waiter, where do you get your meat? Where are these cattle raised? And
Right.
if he doesn't know, I'm not eating.
Is that right?
I'm not eating that. And so I look for something else. And I mean, I won't eat chicken if it's not from an organic farm. And so I want to go to a restaurant that has, if it's fish that I'm eating, I don't want stuff that's come from China. I don't want stuff that's come from a fish farm in the United States. I don't want salmon that have been fed corn. I'm looking for fresh stuff that's wild caught. And so, yeah, it does narrow where you're going to go to eat. And, if I go into a city, I'll do a little research before I get there. I'll jump on Google, and it doesn't take long.
Jeff Benedict is here with us, the author of Poison. You can take a look at his website, jeffbenedict.com. The difference between organic and non-organic, what are we talking about there?
Well, there's a couple ways to look at it. The simple way is that the USDA, the Department of Agriculture, has a stamp they'll put on food that they've inspected as organic. And in order for that to happen, it has to be free of any antibiotics, pesticides, chemicals. If you're growing apples, they've got to be grown a certain way. If you're producing chicken, it's got to be a chicken that's...
Okay.
But, the fact is you can grow organic on your own farm or your own backyard. You're not going to have the USDA come and inspect it.
Right.
But basically, if you're using natural fertilizers and you're not spraying your plants with chemicals to kill bugs, and that's organically made products, that's what it is. I mean, that's what we try to do on our property.
What's the difference between, you said you won't eat a chicken that's not organically raised?
It's like anything else. Chickens and cows were not bred to eat corn.
Okay.
That's not what they're supposed to eat. And they're also not bred to be injected with antibiotics. Over 75% of the pharmaceuticals that are produced and manufactured in the United States are injected into animals.
Is that right?
Not fed to people. Yeah.
Well, why are they injected with antibiotics?
The reason for that is because most of the cows and most of the chickens that are produced in this country for food consumption are in facilities that are so counter to the natural environment of a cow and a chicken. You have thousands of head of cattle jammed into these CAFOs where,
Terrible.
the conditions are horrible and they're prone to illness, sickness, and unnatural breeding and everything else. And so to counter that, these animals are pumped up with drugs while they live there and while they eat. And you are what you eat. You can say whatever you want, but when you're eating cattle and chicken or pigs, whatever, that have been filled up with these chemicals, with these drugs, and then fed something that's not their natural diet. Cows want to eat grass. That's what cows are supposed to eat. They're supposed to eat grass.
Right.
Chickens like to eat bugs. That's what they should eat.
Right.
When you put them in a building and they never go outside, they never see the light of day, they never see fresh air, and they peck at grain that's manufactured by, some chemical company out in the Midwest.
Right.
Not good.
All right, let me ask you that. On top of that, when you went organic, when you decided to make that change, do you feel better?
Oh,
I mean, you could feel the difference.
Absolutely.
Give me an example.
I exercise every day anyways. I've been doing that since, I was a teenager just to stay healthy. And I was never a guy that was like, overweight or stuff like that. But I noticed when we made this switch that, I had more energy. I could go longer. I could go with less sleep.
Right.
And I even I shed like 5 or 6 pounds, which for me is kind of a lot.
Right.
And I wasn't trying to lose weight. It was just that this food, and you can taste the difference. I mean, I'm one of those guys, like I got my passions and things that I'm pretty crazy about, like everybody else. And one of them for me is food. I love to eat.
Right.
And I like to eat a lot. And I like food that tastes really good. And this, when you grow your own strawberries, I'm telling you, you just can't go to the store and buy something that compares to picking it out of your backyard and going in and putting it on your cereal in the morning.
You won't eat fish fed corn either.
Yeah, most people don't know that, the biggest diet for salmon is about the most popular fish today for consumers to buy in the grocery store. Most of the salmon that you buy in a grocery store, that salmon has been fed a steady, heavy diet of corn. It's the same thing we feed the cows and the chickens, and it's because it's cheap and it's subsidized. And think about it. Salmon swimming around eating corn. Right. I mean, you can't do that, on the Snake River in Idaho. Sure. It's corn not floating around out there. Right. So what's going on?
Right.
Well, when you put these things in fish farms, which is where a lot of this fish comes from today, it's a farm. It's just like a factory for cows, but except it's fish, and they're fed things that fish wouldn't normally eat, and it's mostly corn. If you look, I was just in Stop and Shop yesterday buying some fish.
Right.
There's the sockeye salmon that's wild caught, and it is beautiful red. Deep red.
Okay.
And then the farm salmon is right next to it. And even my son said, Dad, why is that so light? Where's the color? Where's the redness? I said, well, that's a farm-raised salmon. That's a wild salmon.
Right.
And so even a kid can see the difference, and you can taste the difference. And there is a difference in the health benefits.
To do research for the book, you went through like a slaughterhouse. You went through a couple other places that said change your life. Can you tell everybody a little bit about that?
I went to a huge, one of the biggest meat packing plants in the United States. It's in Texas. And one of the things I love about this job is, if you're going to do a book, you really need to know an awful lot of information. And so it's like going to school all the time. I've never been in a meat packing plant. Mm-hmm. I don't know what they look like. Most Americans haven't.
I haven't either.
Because you can't get in one.
Sure.
It's not a public building. You got to have special permission. I was fortunate to get. I mean, I had to put on, one of those hazmat suits to get in there. I looked like I was going into a chemical plant. I had to get scrubbed down. I mean, there was a whole bunch of things I had to do just to get in the building.
Right.
And when I got in there, I saw how meat goes from carcass to package. And, I mean, literally followed through the whole chain. And I spent, a half a day there. It was an amazing experience. It did change my whole perspective on meat. I like red meat. I like a good steak, a New York strip, a T-bone, a piece of prime rib, and I still eat those. But I tell you, I'm careful about where meat comes from and how often I don't eat a lot of it, but I eat it. But I rarely eat ground beef, almost never.
Because?
Well, because there's a big difference between hamburger meat and steaks in terms of its susceptibility to pathogens like E. coli. Because of where ground beef has come from on the cow, it's from the rear quarter where cow goes to the bathroom.
Okay.
And that's where E. coli, there's basically two ways for E. coli to get out of a cow onto your meat. One is if you rupture the intestines when you're slaughtering the cow, and it leaks out. Or when the cow goes to the bathroom, it gets in that area of the cow that is the most popular area for making ground beef. The other thing is when ground beef is made, it's enormous pieces and sums of parts. It's all the leftovers.
Right.
That's ground up into one huge vat and then pumped into bags. And so if you get a pathogen on a little piece of meat and then you get it in the vat and mix it all up,
it's everywhere.
It's everywhere. Whereas steaks are individually cut. They come from a different part of the body that's removed from that area on the cow. And also, when you cook a steak, you're throwing it right on the heat, and the E. coli would be on the exterior.
Yep.
And it's burned off. And so, the likelihood of you getting E. coli from a New York strip, very, very low.
Now, is E. coli something that builds up in the body, or is it just a one shot and done?
It invades. I mean, we all have E. coli in us right now. I mean, 2 or 3 days after birth, you have E. coli that develops in your system, and those are not dangerous strains of E. coli, but there's a half a dozen strains of E. coli that you better not get in your body.
Right.
And they come in typically through food or contaminated water.
Okay.
You get them at water parks, at petting zoos, or in food. And if you get one of those strains, 0157H7 is the most popular one. It's the Jack in the Box one that my book is about. That's the most common one that people get today. And if that gets in there, there's not a lot that can be done. You need to hope and pray that your immune system is strong enough to fend it off. But if you're a child or if you're elderly, the chances of that are, go way down.
Jeff Benedict is our guest, 860-442-WXLM. We've had a couple of people on hold for quite a while. If you don't mind, we'll take a call, 1 or 2 calls here. Pete is up first. Good morning, Pete. You're on with Jeff Benedict.
Good morning, Jeff.
Hey, Pete.
And Lee. Jeff, Lee's pretty good with the interview, huh?
Pretty good. He's great.
Oh, he's right on top.
Gee, thanks, Pete.
You're very welcome. To Jeff, I want to say I wish our authorities and the people who are supposed to protect us had your enthusiasm. And I admire your ability to put this stuff together. Not many people can actually do the work and lay the groundwork out and come and have people have a book they don't want to put down.
Well, that's really kind of you to say that, Pete. I appreciate it. It is a lot of work, but fortunately for me, it's like play most of the time. I love this job. It is like, if you could have told me when I was a senior at Waterford High School that I'd be doing this for a living, I would have looked at you like, what are you, nuts?
Yeah, did you ever want to do this as a kid?
No. I mean, the only writing I ever did, Lee, as a kid was when we were in high school. You probably don't even remember this. I wrote some sports stories for the Waterford High School. Yeah, I don't remember. It's not really a newspaper, but the first thing I ever wrote for print was I covered the East Lyme Waterford Thanksgiving Day football game.
Is that right?
Yeah, and then I wrote about John Lennon's death when we were in high school and stuff like that, but never had.
Did you write about the baseball team?
No, I didn't.
Oh, so you didn't interview the strikeout king?
Thanks, Pete.
Take care.
Have a good one, buddy. That's fascinating. I didn't realize that. So when you were growing up, what do you think you were going to do?
Well, when I left school, when I was in college, my first thought was I wanted to be a history professor.
Okay.
And that's why when I was at Eastern Connecticut, I majored in history, in American history. Then after that, I went up to Northeastern for graduate school and worked as an assistant basketball coach at Northeastern for a year. And at that point, that's what I wanted to do, was coach college basketball.
Okay.
I was really into it, dedicated a season to it, loved it. But after the year was over, I loved it just as much, but it was really clear to me that if I wanted to be the kind of father and husband I wanted to be, being a college football coach at a really high level was going to be really tough. And so for family reasons, I decided to go in a different direction, and ultimately it led to writing.
It is. It's a heck of a journey you're on. And again, the book is Poisoned. It's his brand new book. Of course, it is one of many. If you check out his website, jeffbenedict.com, you can see a whole laundry list of great stuff that he puts together. And of course, sports has always been in your background almost the whole way, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you really love sports.
Yeah.
Again, you're writing for Sports Illustrated. Can we get any sneak peeks as to what's coming from Sports Illustrated? You got to hold that close to the vest.
Yeah, they don't like that.
Okay, all right, then save it. I don't want to get you in trouble. We'll take one more call, and then we're going to be pretty much out of time. Mike from Ledyard. Good morning, Mike. You're on with Jeff Benedict.
Good morning, Jeff. Good morning, Lee. You were talking about the fish farms. Isn't it true, or I've heard anyways, that most of these farms actually are outside the U.S., mainly China?
There's an enormous amount of fish shipped into this country from China. People would be just bowled over if they realized how much fish in our grocery stores comes from China. And it really does raise the question, why? Why in the world does a country like ours that has so much ocean and coastal waters and tremendous fishing, why are we getting fish from China?
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Well, you said that too earlier. You said you will not eat any fish from China.
No.
What's the reason behind that?
Oh, because first of all, that is all farm raised.
Okay.
All. The conditions are, the farms that I've seen in China are horrendous. The New York Times has done some blow-your-mind cover stories on the fish farming industry in China. It's enough to turn your stomach. And the bottom line is, we don't inspect it.
Okay.
Most of the food that comes into this country, 99, there's a statistic, and Rosa DeLauro is the expert on it, our congresswoman from Connecticut.
Right.
But 99% of the food that's imported into the U.S. is not inspected. So we don't really know what the heck is going on in China, and yet people are just eating this stuff.
The top three things you will definitely not eat.
Well, I don't eat ground beef.
How about ground turkey, ground chicken, any of that stuff?
Not much, but more so just because I don't like it.
Okay.
I don't eat ground beef because of safety concerns and health concerns.
Is the E. coli on ground turkey and ground chicken as prevalent as ground beef or no? No. Okay.
No.
All right.
I try to stay away from bagged lettuce.
Okay.
Bagged leafy greens. I eat a lot of salad, but I want fresh stuff.
Okay.
All the E. coli outbreaks with leafy greens are typically from bagged stuff.
Okay.
And I don't eat pork at all.
Okay.
And I used to be a big pork eater before this book.
Because?
And now I don't touch it. No bacon, no hot dogs, never.
Why? I don't eat it ever, but I'm just wondering why.
Because of what the way pigs are raised and what they're fed and what they eat. I don't want to eat that.
You're all about what the animal eats. That's what you're about.
It's a big part of what I eat. Yeah.
Okay.
Especially this time of year with barbecuing season, summer, people are putting lettuce and tomatoes on their hamburgers. When pathogens are transferred from produce to people, it's typically on the exterior of produce.
Okay.
E. coli gets into produce fields from contaminated water, typically.
Okay.
And so if you buy lettuce, just the simplest thing to do is peel off the outer leaves, throw them down the garbage disposal, or put them in the compost, or throw them in the garden, or whatever. But if you take the exterior leaves off, or the same thing with an onion, what it's like peeling an onion, you're going to cut way down on your chances.
Okay.
If you're cooking hamburgers, big no-no. Don't bring your plate of burgers out to the grill, throw the burgers on the grill and cook them, and then put the cooked burgers back on the plate. Dumb.
Because the E. coli is there.
You got the blood on the,
right.
Even if it doesn't look like a lot, that's where the damage is.
Okay.
So you bring a second plate out and you put the cooked burgers on there.
All right, last one about fruit, because I eat a lot of fruit every day, but how important is it to really clean it?
Yeah, just, you don't need to soak it in ammonia and all that craziness. Just wash it, you know. But you're always better. My big thing is you're always better off to buy your fruit from a local, if you have a farmer's market, a local farm stand where you know where they're growing it, and it doesn't have a sticker on it that says from Peru. I mean, it's not that Peru is bad. It's just buy something that's local.
Sure. I'll tell you, Jeff, we could have talked for another couple hours. I appreciate the time. It was fantastic.
It's fun.